Hello everybody and welcome back into the fort. My name is Tyler Saves Ya Bucks and I am here to do a Pillow 14 for the new Spirit Dragon, Shiko, Paragon of the Way. Paragon? It's one of those. This is coming soon in Tarkir Dragonstorm, which should be starting its spoiler season either today or tomorrow. Whenever I post this video, I did an article about this exact list on Commander's Herald, which you could check out right now, but also I'll give you a little bit more backstory right here. And you might be asking yourself, why 14 cards? Well, it's very simple. The name of the channel is The Pillow Fort, and the Pillow 14, it works far too well. But also, including your commander, that's 15 cards. And it gives you a very good percentage of drawing at least one of these cards that I'm going to be talking about in your opening hand. I believe when it comes to the 14, you have a 67% chance of drawing one of these cards in your opening hand. That way you have part of your engine rolling from the very start of the game. So let's jump right into it. All of these cards are going to total under $14, so you can get a nice jump start into one of these new Spirit Dragons that Tarkir is bringing us. So let's start by looking at Shiko, Paragon of the Way. It is 2 and Jeskai for a 4/5 flying vigilant Spirit Dragon. When it enters, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. Copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So it's a little bit of a Savine's Reclamation some people have been talking about. But it's, as Magic players say, on a stick. So we can do a lot of things to trigger that multiple times. Since it only does it when it enters, the first thing I thought of is Blink. So this deck, believe it or not, is going to be a Jeskai Blink deck with a few tricks and tips along the way that really synergize with Shiko specifically. Let's get into how we fuel the engine first with discarding cards. Anything in these colors that wants to be doing non-creature stuff, you want a Jeskai Ascendancy in that deck. It's 3 mana for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Untap those creatures, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So what that allows you to do is continually put things in your bin that you'll want to recast with your commander, while at the same time buffing up your entire team to drive some power forward. There's a lot of other discard spells in this list that we'll go over and have good benefits along the way, but this one is just so clutch for this specific style of deck because you don't have to keep putting mana into it. You just keep getting that effect over and over. Another creature that enters and does multiple things, much like our commander, is Charming Scoundrel. This came from Eldraine just a year ago. Wow. Time moves fast. It is a 2 mana 1/1 human rogue with haste. When it enters, choose one. Discard a card, then draw a card. Create a treasure token or put a Wicked Roll token attached to a creature you control. So we're going to be doing one of those first two most likely. The discard a card, then draw a card, great for turn 2. That way you can throw something in your graveyard that you'll want to bring back when you cast your commander later. Or you just want to do some treasure making so that you can ramp yourself a little bit to get your commander out a little earlier. Something I should mention with your commander, again with Shiko, you cast a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. Whereas a lot of other things like Jeskai Ascendancy, you do non-creature spells. This is anything that's not a land. So you could also bring back Charming Scoundrel with your commander when you blink it. Next up, we have one of my favorite cards, Frantic Search. It is 2 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Untap up to 3 lands. Why I like this so much is because of the fact that it helps you keep sketchy hands. I am not immune to doing that after playing for more than a decade. I still, every once in a while, pick up a hand and go, it's almost there. You know what? I'm just going to roll with it. Frantic Search is beautiful because it's basically free. You cast it, you get rid of some of the cards that were a little too sketchy, draw some more, untap 3 lands, and you can do more on that turn. On top of that, if you cast it with Shiko later, you're casting it without paying its mana cost. So you can untap 3 lands again, and it's a little form of ramp. Frantic Search, and it's only 50 cents or so. It's always a good pickup. Windfall, speaking of having people pick things up, you're going to discard your hand and then draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. It's a 3 mana sorcery. As I say in the article, this is a great even turn 3 play in this deck because you want to fill your graveyard with things that you recur for free, and by doing that on turn 3 you can disrupt your opponent's plans because they kept their hand because they had things and spells they were ready to play in certain orders. Turn 3 Windfall, that's a little crazy, especially if you're doing spell slinger stuff too. You can kind of dump your hand a little bit, Windfall, and draw more cards. Bitter Reunion is a card I think more people should be playing. It is 1 and a red for an enchantment. When it enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards, and then you can pay 1 and sacrifice it. Creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. This is just great because it comes in, it kind of does that looting effect, and then, or actually it's rummaging. That's when you discard first and then draw. But you do some rummaging to start, and then you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to give your creatures haste. Now it's in your graveyard. You can recur it again with Shiko, sack it. Of course, the copy will just go poof, but either way, doing that twice is a kind of cool little corner case that Shiko brings to the table. A new card, Broadside Barrage, is 1 blue and a red for an instant. It deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Draw a card, then discard a card. This isn't the craziest include of all time, but what this does is give us some specific removal that we can have in the deck that also helps keep your engine churning. And bringing this back again with your commander will allow you to kind of snipe something out of nowhere when people don't realize that, oh, if you just blink your commander, you can bring that right back. It'll be a good value play. You find the Villain's Lair. This is a fun one from the first D&D set. It's 1 blue for an instant. Choose one. Oh, foil their scheme, counter target spell, or learn their secrets. Draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So this again is a form of interaction, much like the last one, that also could be some looting, discarding, drawing, all of that. So whether you need it in the early game, or let's say early game, you do the drawing, discarding effect. Later, you can bring it back if you blink at instant speed and counter a spell by casting this copy. It can do some tricky stuff, so modal spells in this deck is kind of a good call to make. Now let's do the blinking, because that we can't really have the deck be a blink deck without some really good blink spells. I'm sure you know what blinking is, but blinking is when you exile something and bring it back. You blink it from existence. You get what I'm saying. Let's go with one of the staples in this strategy, Soul Herder. Also one of the coolest arts of all time. Soul Herder is 1 blue and a white for a spirit, 1/1. Whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it, and at the beginning of your end step, you may exile another creature you control and return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So you blink something at the end of your turn every one of your turns. That is really great value for free that you'll be able to, I wouldn't say abuse with Shiko, but it's just a consistent thing that you can rely on. And Soul Herder, easy for me to say, will be growing more and more and becoming a bigger problem for the rest of the table. Ephemerate. It's one of the best blink spells of all time, and the reason for it is it's 1 mana, it's an instant, you blink something, but at the same time it has rebound. So when you cast it from your hand, exile it as it resolves, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you cast it again without paying its mana cost. You can do it again with Shiko by casting it again when you blink Shiko. But here's the one thing. You won't get the rebound if you cast this from your graveyard, because it says if you cast it from your hand. So just keep that in mind. But I think 1 mana for 2 blinks is one of the best rates all around, and that's why it's one of the most expensive cards on this list. Sometimes you can't beat the best, and you have to pay a little bit more. Momentary Blink is a much cheaper option. It basically does what Ephemerate does, but it has flashback for 3 and a blue. Now, we can't always assume we're going to have Shiko out for the entire game. Sometimes it could keep getting removed and you don't have enough blink spells or protection spells to keep it around. But if that is the case, having something in your graveyard with flashback that will allow you to cast it again, even though 4 mana is a little steep, it just makes sure that even if you discard it early on in the game, hey, it's still in there. You still have the ability to bring it back. Our next spell is Nahiri's Resolve. It is 3 white and a red for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and have haste. And at the beginning of your end step, exile any number of non-token artifacts and or creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. So what this does is it, for example, say Shiko and your Soul Ring or something, you can blink both of those and they're just gone until your next turn, and then they come back. And then if you remember, creatures you control have +1/+0 and haste. So Shiko can drop down. It's got a little bit of a power boost. You can attack with it again, and then blink it. Let's not forget that Shiko is a 4/5 with flying and vigilance. So that's a pretty good attacker, and you want to be able to try and close out the game with these types of decks. And Nahiri's Resolve does that while also letting you recur things from your graveyard. Essence Flux is a 1 mana blink spell, but what it says here is return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's a spirit, put a 1/1 counter on it, and your commander happens to be a spirit. So again, it's just a 1 mana blink spell, but with that one little creature type tweak, all of a sudden you're going to get a +1/+1 counter on your commander. It's just a nice little include. Plus, Soul Herder is also a spirit. So Parting Gust is white for an instant. This is a card I completely overlooked when it came to Bloomburrow, and honestly, shame on me, because it's really interesting. So you can gift a tapped fish when you cast this, and then I'll read the rest of this. So exile target non-token creature. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. So what this means is if you gave somebody the tapped fish, this is basically a path to exile, where you're going to exile target non-token creature for the 2 mana, you gift them the fish, and it just stays exiled. But if you want to do it to your own thing, you can still do that. You don't have to promise a gift, and you can just blink something. It'll come back on the next end step, which is good for board wipes and other things like that to dodge those. And it'll come back with a 1/1 counter, much like the last blink spell that we just talked about. So Parting Gust, it kind of does, 2 different things in the deck with the blinking and the removal. Plus, if that's in your graveyard, when you cast it, let me just make sure. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast this spell. If you do, create, okay. So it doesn't have that wording that Ephemerate did, where if you only get that if you cast it from your hand. Here, you can cast it from the graveyard with Shiko and gift that tapped fish, and then just exile somebody's something. It's a nice card. I'm almost mad at myself because I did the thing that I always tell people not to do, where I just kind of skim read it and went, it's a blink spell. It's kind of okay. It's really good, that modality that I talked about before. The last card that we have for today is Explosive Getaway. It's a card I've talked about a couple times, and this is, I think, the second time I featured it in an article. It is a sorcery that is 3 red and a white. Exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and then it deals 4 damage to each creature. So it's a kind of wonky board wipe, but what this will allow you to do is blink your commander, deal that 4 damage, level the playing field a little bit, and then your commander can come back onto play. Now, it also only deals 4 damage to each creature, which your commander has 5 toughness. So, if you really need to, you could keep your commander on the field and blink one of your other value pieces, bring it back, wipe the board, and you have a bit more of a setup. It's just a nice little twist that you can do with this, but most likely you're going to be exiling your commander, saving it from the sweeper, and bringing it back to do another thing. I think this is just such a big tempo play that if you're behind on board, it'll be great because you're able to do that, kind of level the playing field, cast something from your graveyard again, and get your engine rolling, to talk about Ether Drift again. But also it's great if you're ahead, if you're close to finishing things out and people are building up boards and have a bunch of little tokens and everything, and it goes to your turn and you do this move. That might just seal the deal for the game. So the fact that this is still around 25 to 50 cents is a great pickup from Ether Drift. And I highly suggest you check it out. So that is the Pillow 14 for Shiko. As I said, I have an article out about it right now, which you can read a little bit more about. Also, in my Architect, that's where I build a lot of these, I have my maybe board with stuff I almost put into the deck. And you can check that out. I'll put a link somewhere so you can see the Architect. And I'm smiling because one of the cards I almost put in here was Standstill. That is a 2-mana enchantment that whenever a player casts a spell, sacrifice Standstill, and then each of that player's opponents draw 3 cards. And I was like, oh, you could do that. It'll sacrifice, you'll draw the cards, you bring it back with Shiko. And then I was like, so this is a little too mean. So let me know in the comments if I should have added that here. I appreciate you hanging out with me here in the fort before all the Dragonstorming goes on, and I hope to see you back the next time I post a video here or on one of my article series, as I said, on Commander's Herald. So thank you again, and as always, I will see you next time in the fort.